And is it the moment? I mean, Rayon, fairly short period of time in your life as a character.
Yeah.
The movie was over. There was a wait till the movie opened and everything, but
yeah,
opening things doesn't seem to be your priority either. I mean, obviously you're putting yourself out there for the film and all, but you know, doesn't sound like the commercial aspect of it is really your priority. Are you taking a sweet moment from that, and that's what you take away from a picture like this? I mean, besides,
you know what I take away a lot of things is that, you know, you kind of get reminded of the possibilities of life, that wonderful things can happen when you work really, really hard. That's a great thing just to be reminded of again and again. And you know, I think my investment in this film obviously was a creative one, an emotional one. The fact that people are seeing the film too is really great. I've made a lot of films that no one's seen, that haven't been released. So when they hit their mark and they connect with people and they work in some way, it's a wonderful thing.
So you're not up on the mountain, just kind of there for the art. You want to connect with people. That's a critical part of it for you.
Well, I mean, you can't deny that film is a public medium. It's a communicative experience. If it wasn't, you wouldn't record the data. You wouldn't make the play. You wouldn't write the book. You'd keep it in your mind. I mean, why? I mean, write it for yourself maybe, and then read it later. I don't know. You can live in a closet, but I do think that communication is a part of the process, and that still stays in the world of art. You know, you put a brush to the canvas, and you start to say something. You tell a story, or you share a moment or a feeling. Right? You put it on the wall, and you share your idea, your perspective with other people. They in turn consume it. They have an opinion or a personal or private experience, sometimes in a very public place. And that becomes a part of the fabric of a culture or society, right? So I think that's very much a part of the creative process. People seeing, ingesting, digesting, consuming a work. Even this interview. If it's not seen, it's not completed, right? So creating, digging something up, dreaming up a conversation, sharing it with people, that being consumed, and in turn becoming a part of their lives. That's the osmosis of it all, I guess, right?
And completely different being on stage in front of people?
Yeah, being on stage is completely different in a simple way. You know, when you're on stage, well, let me put it this way. When you're making a film, you're working with an outline, a story, a character, building that character, given circumstances, very collaborative process. You have your one vertical within this kind of greater scheme. When you make music, you are yourself when you're on stage. There's no character. Nobody else is giving you the lines. You wrote songs and stories usually from your gut or your heart. Sometimes people write conceptual things or rock operas or something, but most of the time you're on stage. You're who you are, and sometimes more of yourself than you ever are. But you know, making music, if you happen to also be the songwriter and producer and, you know, direct your own videos and work on production for your shows, and, you know, as musicians have to do these days, become, you know, social media experts and marketers and producers and half a record company and managers in a sense, then it's probably more akin to being a writer, director, producer who also edits your own films. It's a much more immersive thing. You're more responsible for different components. Doesn't mean one's more rewarding than the other or more challenging, but I would say that would be the difference.
And are you a social media person?
Yeah, you have to be, and as a musician, you absolutely, it's a necessity.
Do you like it?
There are parts of it that I like. I like communicating. I don't like some of the frivolous bullshit about the social media. but I certainly like the power that it gives people, artists. It was a day and age where I had to rely on you. I had to rely on Rolling Stone, or I had to rely on MTV, or I had to rely on CNN to get my story out. And those are all awesome sources of information. They help write, they have really great writers that can filter information and share it with people. I've been the recipient of that hard work and that creative writing, and that's awesome. But it's also really great to give artists the ability to speak directly to their audience, because what it does is it changes the power balance with some of the bigger other third-party intermediaries, right? Like the record companies, like the labels out there around the world. And when you're doing things like touring the world and playing concerts and putting out albums and music, and you live in a world where digital goods are incredibly important and pervasive, I think that social media is a great tool that's changed the leverage as far as the artist and the third party goes. So that's an awesome thing. It's still great for third parties, if they're creative, to get in the middle and provide solutions, whether it's media or labels or promoters or whatever it is, publishers. That's great if they provide a service that helps the artist, but it's nice to have a little bit of the balance change, so you don't have to ask permission in order to get your message out to the public.
And what about the feedback part? Is that...
Well, the feedback part is interesting. I mean, you have to be good at filtering, nonsense from information, from data. But data is great. Data is wonderful. If you think about it like a hospital, what would a hospital be without data? An empty building filled with, people in bandages, right? You need data. You need history. You need to know that person's allergic to penicillin. This person over here has a history of heart disease. And I think that, in a way, whether you're in the film business or you're in the tech business, you can use data to learn and to take that information and do a better job for your audience, for your customers, for yourself. And I think that can be a good thing to know. I'm not saying that everyone should read their comments on any given social platform, but there is a lot to learn as far as feedback goes, whether you're an artist, a brand, a company, or a government.
So better is not just an internal thing for you. It's you actually are interested in the feedback of the world, and on some level, not all of every word of it, but
yeah, I think that you can get some kind of a gist. It's democratic, right? At the end of the day, it's a vote, and a comment is sometimes even more than a vote. It gives you some insight into the subtext of why people may be voting that way. So it's an interesting way to learn about people. I've been involved with technology for a long time. It was a necessity at first for me, but I'm incredibly entrepreneurial. I've started 3 companies outside, which would probably surprise a lot of people. But I have a ticketing company, an e-commerce company, and a platform that's more kind of pure tech, where we're rethinking how we're able to share what we do live, and to give artists and event creators and audiences something really valuable and a chance to have a sustainable system as well.
So are those an artistic endeavor for you on some level?
I find a lot of art and creativity in some of the other side of the brain, I mean, it is, especially in tech and business. I think there's a lot of creativity going on there, and I also think it's important for creative people to participate in the digital architecture that's going on right now. I mean, there's a world being created right now, and I think that artists should have a seat at that table. Not just businessmen or technologists.
Well, they certainly fight to keep the artists from having too much of a seat. I mean, it's an ongoing battle, it feels like.
There's always a battle between art and commerce. It's that uneasy relationship. It's like two people that they fuck and it's amazing, but they just can't even have a conversation.
Yeah.
without getting into an argument.
It's getting harder. I mean, it's hard. The unions out here have gotten kind of the crap beat out of them the last 10 years or so.
Yeah.
Particularly as technology's evolved. It's kind of like studios have figured out how to take advantage of the fact that nobody's quite, they're one step ahead of where the public is, so they kind of see it coming, and they've undercut, I think, the power of the artist to survive, really.
Yeah.
A lot of people doing a lot of really well, but a lot of the people in the middle class are kind of getting crushed as artists.
Yeah, I mean, there's a fundamental shift happening right now. I mean, anything that can be live in a digital way will live in a digital way. That's the rule. If you have a good that can be ones and zeros, it will be ones and zeros. Eventually, this camera, it's be the size of a chip in his contact lens. That's inevitable.
This is a third of the size of the camera we were using 6 months ago. So.
Yeah, and it won't be won't even be a camera or lens soon. It'll just map the space. Mm-hmm. You won't need this light at all. There won't be lights. That will be an archaic thing. I mean, lights will be looked at as laughable at some point, because we're going to be able to map the space that we're in, and you'll be able to choose any kind of camera, any kind of lens, any kind of flare, any kind of angle, any kind of steady cam or jib arm, or handheld shot that you want, and I think that's probably sooner rather than later.
And it sounds like that would be of interest to you. I mean, like a movie, like a motion capture kind of thing.
I've never done that sort of thing, and I keep telling myself that, the next thing I do, I'm going to explore in that world, because I think it can be incredibly imaginative. But it's also the sort of thing, like, sometimes I travel a lot, and you go into a hotel, and it's obviously been designed by a computer. Like, everything fits in a certain place. They've used the space really well. Obviously there's some financial advantage to using the space well in a building, and then you can sell more rooms, have more rooms. But there's some humanity that's lost as well.
Well, actually, it was a fascinating thing, because Peter Jackson, when they were doing Tintin, I guess, was saying how when he held the digital camera, which you can basically move your hand and it does, pan up, or does a fly up to 20 feet in the air or whatever, that when he used it, it looked like him, and when Spielberg used it, it looked like him, and when Jim Cameron used it, it looked like his. That immediately the artist was able to actually take that technology and make it somehow their own. Which is fascinating. Yeah,
I think that's true. I mean, it's a similar thing as if you work with the different DPs or editors. I do that all the time, and at the end of the day, it still looks like Bartholomew Cubbins' piece. It's easy to get your fingerprints on things. All this stuff, they're just tools. You never want to be a slave to technology, but you make a technology a slave to your creative ideas.
So are the passions that you came into all this with 20 years ago, is this just all an extension of the passions continuing, or? I think in some ways it is, because I'm spending my life doing a lot of creative things. I've always been entrepreneurial, ever since I was a kid. And yeah, I think it's an extension of all of it, and yeah. So it just keeps getting more interesting.
In a way, it does. Because you lose a little of the panic of youth. And I think there's hopefully some grace comes, and knowing that it's going to be okay. That's a nice thing. But sometimes the panic, the fear, is what drives you ultimately to greatness. So it's a bit of a conundrum.
So do you ever have a hard time finding that passion, that driving thing?
No, I never do. I'm always kind of compelled beyond a reasonable doubt, like I said.
And a good thing.
Yeah.
See, my old Jared Leto story was that 15 years ago, I was sitting in Swingers, and there was this blonde guy with very short hair by the phone, and he was like staring at me, and I couldn't figure out why he was staring at me, and then I realized it was you. I think it was you, at least. And then I saw Fight Club a year and a half later, and I think you were out there developing your character.
Oh, really? Angel
Does that sound
face.
like you?
It sounds like me. I mean, my God, it must have been a long time if I was on a payphone.
Well, you were hanging out by the payphone. There was like the bathroom on either side. And
oh, really?
And it looked like you were trying to pick a fight, is what it felt like.
Oh, was it?
And I was pretty younger and bigger at the time. And it seemed like you were doing your
I
thing.
probably was. I was out being provocative and just kind of looking into that face of uncertainty, or, you know, that fine line. And, you know, I remember I've done that quite a bit. But, you know, there is that weird space of that you can get into with other animals. You know, that unstable place. That's pretty interesting.
That's where the work is, I guess.
Yeah, the work's there, and you know, every time you make a film, you have an opportunity to learn something. So you want to really push yourself to do that, or else you'll die. You'll be bored to tears.
It doesn't sound like you're bored very often.
I never get bored. The old cliche is true. Only a boring person is bored, probably, but a bored person is certainly boring. Lots of things to do out there, you know.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, man.
Appreciate your time.
I appreciate the conversation.